Hi guys, welcome back to Spelling and Word Study. My name is Mrs. Rhoades and I'm here to get you started on Unit 24, the hard and soft G endings. Please take a second to gather your materials. You will need your purple book open to page 149. You will also need some colorful pens, markers, or crayons. Remember, whatever I mark on my board, you should be marking on your sheet. Please leave room for a key as well. You'll notice I already went ahead and used purple vertical lines to break my words into syllables and pink check marks to signify the stressed syllable in each word. Remember, that's the part we say a little bit louder and stronger. If you'd like to pause the video to add your own syllable breaks and stress marks, do that now. All right, so this week we are focusing on the final sound in each word. You'll notice most of our words this week end with a J sound, and some of them end with a G sound. We're going to talk more about that in a second, but first let's read our list. Please repeat after me. Advantage, average, beverage, camouflage, carriage, cartilage, cartridge, catalog, challenge, colleague, dialogue, discourage, encourage, knowledge, marriage, mileage, mortgage, percentage, prologue, sabotage. Did you hear that J or G at the end of each word? Great. Okay, so first thing I want to tell you is a fun fact. In the English language, we don't have any words that end with the letter J. We have plenty of words that end with the J sound, the J sound, but instead of using the letter J, they use GE. Remember, whenever G is followed by E, it softens, that E softens the G and makes it say J. Now, when you were younger, you probably learned that if you wanted to use the J sound after a short vowel, you'd have to put a D before it. So, for instance, the word edge with a short E would have DGE. Fudge, short U, followed by DGE. Badge, short A, followed by DGE. So if you had a short vowel and you wanted to follow it with a J sound, you had to use DGE. For everything else, long vowels, vowel teams, consonants like the letter N, you would use GE by itself. So for instance, rage, huge, lunge, you would just use the GE. The silent D was only used with short vowels, okay? So I want you to look at what we're using for endings here. That DGE really doesn't show up in multisyllabic words. There's two exceptions on our list. If you look at the word knowledge, right, like I went to school to gain knowledge, to learn stuff, that ends with DGE. If you look at the word cartridge, that ends with DGE. So over here, purple box equals DGE, and that's going to make a J sound, okay? These are the exceptions. So you just have to memorize those. Those are the weird ones. In general, though, if you have the J sound at the end of a longer word, you're just going to use GE by itself. Forget about all this DGE stuff, okay? Now, what I want you to notice is that in these words, they all, or most of them, end with AGE. Now, you learned that AGE by itself spells age, or page, or rage, or sage, right? But at the end of a big word, because it's an unstressed syllable, right? Advantage, the stress is on the second syllable. This turns into a schwa sound, the sound. Advantage, Average, beverage. I'm going to skip that one for a second. Carriage, cartilage. Discourage, encourage, marriage, mileage, mortgage, percentage. In all these words, we have AGE making an udge sound, right? And that's because it's in an unstressed syllable, so it kind of morphs into a schwa sound. So in all these words, we have AGE, but instead of saying age with a long A sound, they say udge. So I'm going to pronounce that like UHJ. Does that make sense? Udge. Now you'll notice I skipped two words. I skipped camouflage and I skipped sabotage. Because even though we have that same chunk, it's not being pronounced age and it's not being pronounced udge. Instead, it's age, right? Sounds like a short O. That's because these two words come from French. So their pronunciation is more French. So over here, we still have AGE, but instead of making an udge sound, they're making an age sound. Camouflage, sabotage, and actually, if you think about it, so that's a short O, age. It's not even sounding like a j. It doesn't really sound like a J. It's more like a j sound, right? Camouflage, sabotage. So just keep that in mind. Those are also a little weird. Okay. Now, if we're ending our word with a GE, but we want to put a consonant before it, that's fine. So we do that with challenge. We keep the challenge. You can hear the N there, challenge. So we need that N. I don't see any other examples like that. Notice that it's not challenge because it's not the stress syllable. That also morphs into a sound. So right here we have ENGE, and that's making an unge sound. So just like this one, but with an N in there. Okay. For the past several weeks, we have been learning about derivational suffixes, and we know that they can change one part of speech to another. That's not really the case here. This AGE is not being used as a suffix in most cases. There are two exceptions though. I want you to notice the word carriage. Do you see that I right there? It seems a little strange, right? Well, carriage comes from the word carry. What is a carriage? What is a carriage? It's something that carries a baby. So notice when I change carry, the verb, to carriage, the noun, that Y changes to I. You've seen that before, right? In words like tried or dried. We see that again in the word marriage, right? When you marry someone, you are part of a marriage, right? A priest or a justice of the peace performs the marriage. So marry, the verb, becomes marriage, the noun. Again, that Y changes to I. So keep that in mind when you're spelling, right? Because sometimes kids forget to put the I in carriage and the I in marriage, and they don't hear it. So just remember, it's supposed to be there. Okay, so We talked about our soft G words. So all of our words that end with a J sound are going to end with a GE. Sometimes an AGE, sometimes a DGE, sometimes an NGE. But that E is really important because it's softening the G. Now, we do have some other words here that end with a hard G sound. So here's another fun fact. Remember I said that none of our words in English end with the letter J? Well, very few words end with the letter G. There are some, but not a lot. So what we typically do is we put a UE after it. So in a word like colleague, I have 3 letters working together to make the G sound. Looks kind of strange, right? I need that U to act as a buffer because if I put the G and the E together, the E is going to soften the G. So that U is really important. But why do we need the U and E? Why can't we just spell colleague like this? I don't know. We see this with colleague. We see this with dialogue. Again, that GUE is making the G sound. We see it in prologue. We don't see it in catalog, but guess what? It is possible to spell catalog like this, G-U-E, but that's not the preferred American English spelling. British English, they tend to use the UE, okay? So if you come across words that end with G-U-E, just know that they're pronounced G, okay? So all of these words contain G-U-E, but it's just making a G sound. Okay, so what else do we need to talk about? Oh, there is another strange thing here. Well, there's lots of strange things on this list because we have lots of syllables this week that are silent. They're hard to hear. For instance, average. Most people pronounce it average. So the tricky part is going to be right here. Remember that syllable, average. Same thing with beverage. We pronounce it beverage, but it's beverage. So you got to listen for that ER syllable there. Some of our words have letters that are hard to hear. So for instance, knowledge has a W, right? Doesn't make sense when we're pronouncing it knowledge. I only hear the short O. But if we know where this word comes from, we know that knowledge is the collection of things you know, then it's easy to remember. So in my head, I think of it as knowledge, the things I know. Mileage is a weird one because usually if we're adding a suffix that starts with a vowel, we drop the bossy E, right? We've seen that when we add ED, ING, OUS, but for some reason, we keep that E in mileage. Mortgage, that's tricky because there's a T here that's hard to hear. Mortgage. So listen for that. If you know anything about the history of the word mortgage, that T would make sense. Okay, so that's it for the spelling stuff. I do want to make sure you know what all these words mean, and I also want to make sure you're ready to answer the questions on page 152. On 152, you're going to be introduced to a Greek root. The root is LOG or LOGUE. Whenever you see either of these, they have something to do with words, okay? Log and log have something to do with words. So, for instance, in the word dialogue, when you're writing a story and you put dialogue in there, you have two or more characters talking to each other. So dialogue is the talking part in a book. That's where the words are said, character to character. A prologue is something that shows up at the beginning of a book. So if you're reading a story and the author wants you to know something that happened like a year before the story started, the author will put that in the prologue. If the author wants you to know something that happened a year after the end of the story, he or she will put that in the epilogue. Epilogue goes in the back, prologue goes in the front. So think of the prologue as words in the front of a book. Okay? Even the word catalog has to do with words, right? A catalog could be a book of words. Could be like when I was a kid, I would look at the Sears catalog or the Toys R Us catalog, and it would list all the different toys that were for sale. So a catalog is like a book of lists, or a book of words, really, like lists of words. Okay? Now, when you get here, you're going to see other words like a monologue. So if you watch a Jimmy Fallon or one of the late night TV shows, and the person stands up there and tells jokes, they say words to you, that's a monologue. Sometimes that G is softened. So if you think of a word like apology, it's got LOG in it, but now it's a soft G. But an apology is words you say to express that you're sorry, right? So you're just going to go through here, read the definitions, and match them to the words, okay? All right, let's very quickly make sure we know what all of these words mean. So advantage. An advantage is a plus. It's something good. It's something that gives you an extra edge. So for instance, if you're going to play basketball and you're taller than the other players, that's an advantage. It's going to be easier for you to get the ball. Average means in the middle, okay? So the average height for an American woman might be 5'5" or 5'6", right? Women who are taller than that are taller than average. Women who are shorter than that are shorter than average. So the average would be the middle number. A beverage is a drink, right? Orange juice, milk, water, that's a beverage. Camouflage. I bet you've heard this word before. That's like a blending in. So certain animals have camouflage as a defense, right? So an animal with white fur can blend in with the snow. An animal with a brown shell can blend in with the sand, right? If you think of soldiers, they wear camo, right? They wear certain colors that help them blend in with their environment. So that's camouflage. We talked about a carriage, right? That's something like a baby carriage, something that carries a baby. Cartilage is not bone, but it is a part of the body. So it's like hard and bendy material that you find like in your ears. If you feel the tops of your earlobes, that hard bendy stuff, that's cartilage. You also have cartilage in your nose. Sharks have lots of cartilage in their bodies. So hard, bendy material. I apologize. I know I'm making a mess here. Cartridge. That could be like, it's something you insert. So like an ink cartridge, you insert that into your printer. Okay. A catalog, we talked about challenge. If you challenge someone to do something, you dare them, or maybe you accept a challenge. A colleague is a coworker. I am a teacher and I share lesson plans and suggestions with my colleagues, the other teachers. Dialogue, we talked about that, conversation. To discourage someone, that's a verb, is to try to get them not to do something, right? So I would discourage my husband not to go out to the store when it's really snowy outside and slippery and icy. I would discourage him. I'd say, why don't you wait until tomorrow, right? Encourage is the opposite. So when you discourage someone, you say, don't do it. It's a bad idea. When you encourage someone, you say, do it. It's a good idea, right? Like, yes, I think you should run for student council. You would be so good at that. I encourage you to try out. Knowledge, things you know. Marriage, when two people get married. Mileage is the number of miles you drive. Number of miles. So sometimes when people are going on a long trip, they set the mileage on their the dashboard so they can see how many miles they travel. And when people buy a new car, they look for cars that have the best mileage. Is this car going to give me 30 miles per gallon or only 20 miles per gallon, right? We want something with good mileage so we don't have to spend a lot of money on gas. Mortgage, that's the money you have to pay the bank for your house. Most people don't have $300,000 lying around when they're ready to buy a house. So they borrow money from the bank and then they pay it back. Every month they have to pay the bank back a chunk of their mortgage, right? So the bank gives them $300,000, says you can have this money, but for the next 30 years, you're going to have to pay me back a little bit each month. And you're not just going to pay me $300,000, you're going to have to pay me interest as well. So all of that is figured into your mortgage. Percentage means out of 100. Okay? So if I wanted to figure out what percentage of kids were absent yesterday, I could look at the attendance record, and if 5 out of 100 kids were absent, that would be 5%. The percentage of kids absent would be 5%. Prologue we talked about. To sabotage something is to ruin it on purpose. Okay? So if you're really mad at your sister and she's eating a piece of cake and you knock it on the floor, I guess you've just sabotaged her cake. But that's not a great example. Usually we sabotage people's plans. So if your sister's having a birthday party and you do everything you can to ruin her party because you're mad at her, you are sabotaging her party, right? So obviously this is not a nice thing to do. We should not sabotage people's plans. All right, that's all I have for you today. Good luck, and I will see you next time.